What is up, nerds? My name is Jeremy Nathaniel Akers, and I want to talk to you about my favorite liberating structure, critical uncertainties. Now, critical uncertainties is one of these artifact liberating structures. I'll talk more about that in a moment. And he makes use of this particular artifact that is the 2x2 matrix. And I just want to say that the 2x2 matrix is legion. It is everywhere in an infinite number of varieties, and we're going to make use of it for the purpose of scenario play. Now, scenario play is a deep game. Scenario planning is a deep game. It evolved out of this narrative inquiry work, and it gets all types of use by all types of folks. And we're going to be looking at it in one particular line of inquiry, that is the classic liberating structures, critical uncertainties. And then we're going to show an alternative line of inquiry that you can see out there in the foresight methodology. Shout out to Max at the Trusted Seed. So, artifacts. Critical uncertainty is an artifact. What do I mean by that? What I mean to say is that for the purpose of this liberating structures design system I keep rattling on about, is that critical uncertainties foregrounds the use of an artifact, the design specifications or instructions for materials and space to create an artifact that is going to drive the conversation. It's going to turn what is, without the artifact, a very challenging conversation to have. With the artifact, with the use of that 2x2 matrix, suddenly becomes very digestible and easy to understand, and also easy to keep everybody on the same page as we go through the conversation. So that's what I mean by it's an interesting artifact. Now, like I said, scenario play is deep, and not to foreground a warmonger or warmongering, but I think this quote by Dwight Eisenhower, and I don't believe he was a warmonger, truth be told. But here's the quote. "In preparing for battle, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." So what does that mean? In these open systems that we operate in, these complex, dynamic systems, we find ourselves in a situation where the plan that we wrote is outdated before we even wrote it, but definitely after, as we go to apply it. We're confronted by realities that were not in the frame of our expectation. Not that we shouldn't try and control the things that we can. Absolutely, that's going to help keep our quality up. But the plan itself is not the territory. The map is not the territory. But the act of planning helps us to get closer to the right direction. And about this topic with regards to war, I know that there's a lot of nerds out there hurting, feeling ways about the world and all the things that happen in it. And I do want to come away, drop another cliche and another important quote, and that is that those who love peace must learn to organize as effectively as those who love war. And I think that this space around scenario play is important for helping us to do that, with an important distinction. Of course, we can't just take the scenario planning, we can't just take the militarized and colonized version of this tool and simply apply it, because the ontological design, the implications of what tools we use and what tools we employ are so significant. So we have to figure out a way to orient ourselves less about the concrete outcomes, less even about the processes that create those outcomes. Certainly, we want to create mindfulness around these things, but we want to orient our attention much more towards the relationships and ultimately towards life, because that's going to help us to consider possibilities, and that consideration of those possibilities, the planning, the indispensable planning, is the way that considering the possibility helps us to influence our choices, right? This is the vibe. This helps get us on an upward spiral, as far as I can tell. So that's sort of why we want to consider this tool that is critical uncertainties for this scenario play. And it's going to help us to explore plausible challenges. And why do we do that? To give our self a sense of preparation, but again, to influence our choice making around the considerations that are actually in front of us by having a larger set of considerations than only those that are immediately in front of us. So how do we do that? We're going to set the stage, and that's going to vary on your context, but that's going to onboard everybody into our shared frame of reference. Once we do that, our first point of consideration is, what are our uncertainties? In our shared context, what are the factors that are uncertain, that are impossible to predict or control, that have lots of ambiguity around them, that have lots of assumption around them? What are the uncertainties? And as quick as you can, quick like a bunny, give yourself some time for silent consideration, jam in some small groups, toss that stuff into the all space. Get it all on the table as quick as you can. Same story with the critical factors. And what do I mean by critical? I mean that these factors threaten our ability to operate successfully. They really, really, really matter. This is the stuff of significance. Again, silent reflection, small group interaction into the all space, and 10 minutes, bam, Bob up your uncle. You've got a list of critical stuff and a list of uncertain stuff. And then what you want to do is you want to select the two most critical and uncertain. Collect the most critical and the most uncertain. And what is the most? I mean, that's going to vary based on your history, based on your experience. So leverage those things. But don't take all day about it. Come up with what you're going to label your axes. And I keep talking about 2x2 matrix, and I keep talking about axes. So here it is, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a screenshot type person, take a screenshot now. The 2x2 matrix. So on one axis, we're going to put, let's just say, what's critical. And we're going to say we've got more of that critical factor, and we've got less of that critical factor in this half of the equation, right? In this half of the axis. And then we're going to take that uncertain thing. We've got less of that uncertainty going on over here, and we've got more of that uncertainty going on over there, right? We are now using that critical and uncertain factor to label these two axes. And that gives us 4 distinct scenarios where we've got less of our critical things going on and more of the uncertainties. Sounds kind of like, or in more uncertainties. Sounds a lot like hell. Yeah, maybe. Point is, put them down on the map. Doesn't have to take all day, but create that artifact, make it big, make sure everybody can see it, because this is what helps drive the conversation. So now that we have split our map into 4 quadrants, our possible future space, we're going to split into 4 groups, and each group is first going to describe their quadrant. I like to think about it as if I'm dropped out of a helicopter, what do I see, hear, and notice that lets me know that I'm in this situation and not that one? So again, orient towards our description. What's it like there? And what do we see, hear, and notice in that quadrant? Give ourselves 10 minutes in these small groups. Small groups can coordinate however they'd like. If we want to do that 1, 2, 4 all in that 10 minutes. But each group jams on their own quadrant, and then we come back together in the all space to cross-share across all quadrants in just 10 minutes. So now that we've got a description of the scenario, now we want to go ahead and double tap on that and compress that information. So we're going to split back into our 4 groups, and what we're going to do is we're going to meme the scenario. Of course, we have a rich description that tells us all about what we see, hear, and notice. We've done that work. Now, how do we compress that into a shorthand that is easy for us to memorize, to remember, and to refer to? And, keys for meming a scenario is making use of song titles, making use of movie titles, making use of quotes, things that already live in the cultural consciousness that we can then upload and say, like that here, right? In our context. So once more, 10 minutes the groups figure out what's the meme, what is the label that they want to give to their scenario, what's the catchy phrase, the catchier the better. And then we come back again into the all space and we share across all groups, right? So we're doing this back and forth from my quadrant into hearing everybody's quadrants. Now, what we want to invite everybody to do, once we've heard about, once we've got a catchy title, is each group should develop 3 strategies that would help them to operate successfully in their given scenario, right? So I'm in group 1. This is what it was like. This is the way we labeled it. What are we going to do if we find ourselves in that situation? And I think operating successfully is a coping strategy, right? We want to just say, hey, we're in that scenario. Maybe we don't have godlike control and authority to control, edit, and underwrite. We don't have the admin of changing the rules of the environment that created such an outcome, but we do have to operate. We do have to live in that situation. So what are we going to do that's going to help us stay alive? Right? These are our coping strategies, coping for that reality. It's very different than how do we influence it and how do we express our agency and all that shit. Just how do we stay alive there? So develop 3 coping strategies with in your subgroups, and then come back together across all and share those strategies. Once we've done that, we want to invite each group to identify the strategies that they developed that are either robust, that work in many of those scenarios, and which are the strategies that they find are hedging strategies that only seem to apply in their unique specific situation. But they can make all the difference, of course, right, in that situation. And then you want to do yourself some sort of what, so what, now what. Take 10 minutes, identify those strategies, what, so what, now what on your hedging strategies. Bam, Boggs your uncle. That is your critical uncertainties. Groups come back together. They share in the all space. We celebrate our glorious artifact in the way that we have had a coherent conversation about these 4 different scenarios and what we could do to operate successfully in a wide range of plausible futures based around what's critical and uncertain for us, right? So that's one particular line of inquiry that we can take when we have this artifact, right? This is the classic line that is critical uncertainties. Yay! I wish I had confetti animations here. Anyway, an alternative line of inquiry that you can do after this, in place of this traditional critical uncertainties treatment, is to ask again each group to identify. All right, and now we're just using the groups really just for the sake of, hey, we have interacted in these groups for a good long while, right? So let's make use of them. I'm imagining this on the end of the traditional critical uncertainties. We would ask each group to identify where are we now and where would we like to be? And of course, the all-important question, how do we get there, right? So come up with have your discussion about where we are, where would we like to be, then have a different conversation about, okay, how are we going to move to there? How are we going to express agency? And again, I think this is a great example of this vibe of self-sufficiency and using the scenario play, the scenario planning to influence the future that we experience, right? So this is a different line of inquiry. It's a different set of questions that helps guide our conversation towards what we believe matters. I think this is a great line of inquiry. I know it because Max at one of the Crypto Commons gathering showed it to us out of his Foresight methodology collection of tools. I don't know much about Foresight above and beyond that, but Max is a good guy, and if you hit him up at the Trusted Seed, I'm sure he will nerd out with you about it all day long. That's critical uncertainties, ladies and germs, and plus a bonus line of inquiry. And I think that's about all there is to say about it. I mean, critical uncertainties is great. I could talk a little bit about some pairings. I think critical uncertainties pairs extraordinarily well with wicked questions. As a matter of fact, the first meetup I ever went to, we used wicked questions to generate our critical uncertainties to become the axes of our 2x2 matrix. Was a wicked question. I think that's a great treatment because it helps us to really stay with the trouble of paradoxical challenges and to explore them quite plausibly once more. Make them tangible rather than this sticky, interesting philosophical question, but to really wrestle with answering it. Okay, how do we do both of these things? Anyway, critical uncertainties. My name's Jeremy Nathaniel Akers. Thanks for your time, attention, and energy, and stay alive, nerds.